Hi everyone, welcome to Cake It To Me. Today I'll be showing you how to make Italian meringue buttercream. So this is my favorite frosting recipe of all time. This is what I use on all of my cakes, and I actually used to use Swiss Meringue Buttercream, but I found this recipe to be very stable and it holds up better in warmer weather as well. This recipe is also one of my favorites because it's not very sweet. So for all of you who really hate that extremely sweet, sticky frosting, this is the recipe for you because it's very silky, very smooth, and not so sweet. The other thing with this frosting is that because it's so stable, it holds up really well to all cake decorations, especially when you're piping buttercream flowers. So some of the ingredients that you'll need for this recipe are some eggs, and we'll separate the egg whites from them. I'll show you how to do that. A small pinch of salt, some sugar, a little bit of water, and then the two ingredients that we'll need to sort of prep our tools are some white vinegar. And this ingredient is optional, but I find that it helps stabilize my meringue, and that's cream of tartar. In addition to the ingredients, we'll be using a candy thermometer. This will help us keep track of our temperature of our sugar syrup. The first part of making this Italian meringue buttercream involves making the meringue itself. To make a successful meringue, we'll have to prepare our tools with white vinegar, and I'll show you how to do that now. So the way that we're going to prepare our tools is we're going to wipe them down with white vinegar. And what this does is that it removes any residual particles, especially if there's any leftover oil or butter in there. And that actually prevents a meringue from inflating properly. So having the white vinegar wiped down just makes sure that none of those residual oil or butter is left behind in our bowl. And make sure that you wipe down your whisk attachment as well. We're going to begin by separating the egg yolks from the egg whites. You could also use store-bought egg whites. The way that I separate my egg whites is I crack them, and then using the shell itself, I basically cradle the yolk back and forth, and the egg white comes off from the egg yolks. Now save the egg yolks. They're amazing in things like lemon curd and pastry cream, so don't throw those away. The other way that you can separate the egg white from the egg yolk is to crack the egg and put the egg yolks in between your fingers. And again, just cradle the egg yolk back and forth, and the egg white should come apart from the egg yolk pretty easily. It's really important that when you're doing this step that you don't have any soap on your hands, because soap also hinders the formation of meringue. So just make sure your hands are super clean and that there's no soap left over. Once your egg whites are separated, you're going to add them to your mixer. Then you'll attach your whisk attachment, and eventually you'll add your cream of tartar. Okay, so once you've added your egg whites to your mixer stand, go ahead and start it. And as you're whipping them, you can add a sprinkle of cream of tartar. This helps just acidify the egg whites and create a better meringue, but because we already wiped the inside of the bowl with vinegar, it's not absolutely necessary. Go ahead and whip the egg whites for a few minutes until the egg whites are slightly frothy, and then we'll add our sugar. So while your egg whites are whipping, you're going to start on your sugar syrup mix. And so you're going to turn the heat to medium, add your water and your sugar. Give your sugar syrup mix a quick stir, just so that the sugar at the bottom of the pan doesn't burn. We're aiming for the temperature of our sugar syrup to be about 240 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And so what you want to do is you just want to adjust the temperature accordingly. Keep that thermometer in there until it reaches that temperature. So once your egg whites start to look a little foamy like this, what you're going to do is you're going to add about 2 tablespoons of sugar. And start your mixer again and just slowly add the sugar. At this point, you want to keep an eye out on both your sugar syrup and your egg whites, so don't walk away from this. This is a really important step. You just want to keep controlling the heat on your sugar syrup so that it comes to 240 about the same time that the egg whites are ready. And for the egg whites, what you're really looking for are stiff peaks to form. So you can see here that the egg whites are ready. And I can just turn up the heat on my sugar syrup mixture so that it comes to the temperature range between 240 to 250 very quickly, and then I'll be adding the sugar syrup to my egg whites as they whip. So as you can see, when the sugar syrup starts to come close to its temperature range, it's going to start boiling really quickly. And like I said, it's a temperature range between 240 and 250. I have poured when it was closer to 240. I've poured this mixture when it was closer to 250, and there really isn't a big difference. So it gives you a big range to work with. Also, I want to mention that the reason why we're doing this step is essentially to pasteurize the egg whites. So we're killing off any bacteria that might be in the egg whites. But if you don't feel comfortable doing this yourself, you can always use pasteurized egg whites. Now that my sugar syrup has come to temperature, I am ready to pour. So I'm going to turn off the heat, remove my thermometer, and slowly start pouring this mixture into the egg whites as the egg whites are being whipped. That's why it's really important to have either someone else helping you whip the egg whites with a hand mixer or an automated mixer like I have here. One thing you want to be very careful about as you're pouring is that you don't want the sugar syrup to pour down the side of the bowl, because that'll actually cool it and harden it. So you want to pour the sugar syrup between the whisk and the bowl so that it directly hits the meringue. Also, just a word of caution, the sugar syrup, as you would expect, is actually very, very hot. So you just want to be careful about pouring, making sure nothing's in the way. Once the sugar syrup is added to the egg whites, the bowl will become quite hot, and so before you add your butter, you really want to get this down to room temperature. Now you could just let it whip until it comes to room temperature. On a hot day, that could take a really long time. So instead, I choose to just cool it down with a bag of peas. In the past, I've also used just a bag of ice or a cold paper towel. Once you're absolutely sure that your egg whites have reached room temperature, you can start adding your softened butter. Now, how you add your butter doesn't really matter. I'm just adding it a tablespoon at a time here so it'll mix better, but I've also seen people just throw in the whole stick. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but this step is not a make or break step. So how you add your butter doesn't matter, but the temperature of the butter is what actually makes a buttercream come together. You want your butter to be kind of a perfect consistency. You want it to be soft enough to the touch, but not so soft that it gives completely and is almost melting. After you've added all of your butter, you can really turn up the speed on your mixer to high and let it whip for about 15 to 20 minutes. The buttercream is going to go through several different stages. First, it's going to look really soupy and not like frosting at all. And then after a few minutes, it'll start to look kind of like ricotta cheese. You'll start seeing bigger sort of clusters in the frosting. And eventually, after about 10 to 15 minutes, it'll just totally come together and have the most amazing, perfect frosting consistency. For me, this frosting came together in about 10 minutes. After it's come together, you do want to make sure you take the time to scrape down the edges and give it one more mix before we start adding our flavorings. Since I was just making vanilla buttercream, I just added some pure vanilla extract. You can also add other flavors such as lemon zest or any other extracts of your choice. This is also the step where you would want to add any colors, particularly gel food colors, to your buttercream if you'd like. So this is it. This is the recipe I use on all of my cakes. If you want to make chocolate buttercream out of this, all you have to do is add a little bit of cocoa powder. And you'll see why it's my favorite frosting. As you can see, this frosting holds up really well to all different decorations. I'm just using an open star tip here, making some ruffles, making a rosette, making a rote border. You can see that it really holds its shape. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, go ahead and subscribe and like this video. Thanks!